welcome everyone and ask you to please introduce yourself in the chat using your name, your company, and where you're joining from. We really love to see, how diverse, people who are in the audience are. So thank you very much for that. Keep doing it, please. Then also I'd like to remind you that we are recording this session. You'll be able to share it. You'll be able to watch it again if you wish. And usually we send all of these recordings a couple of days after the webinar in a link, and you can there watch it again or see it in YouTube. If you're joining us from YouTube, you can also comment in the chat. In terms of questions, we do have time for questions. Obviously, we wouldn't really be doing our job if we hadn't prepared some questions, so that we can have a discussion, because today we're just going to have a discussion around these issues. However, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't like to hear from you, because at the end of the day, one of the main reasons to have a webinar is to inform, but the second is to network it and to make sure you know the right person with the answers that you're looking for. So please send your questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and in there we'll be taking them. When we have it in the Q&A box, they're really easy to manage rather than sending them through the chat that get lost. So please do use the Q&A box. And without further ado, I'm going to ask my esteemed panelists today to introduce themselves so that you can get to know them a little bit better, and also understand, what they're working on, and, how, what is sort of the context there, what they're going to be talking about today. So Celia, I'd like you to be the first person, since, you are our partner, to start, and then we'll go with the next panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Belen. Delighted to be here, delighted to join my European colleagues, and really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to hold today. So you must excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so hopefully that won't affect things too much. But anyway, so I'm Celia Greaves. I'm the CEO of the UK Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. We're the largest pan-UK grouping on hydrogen in the UK. Our 100 plus members represent over 200,000 employees worldwide, with combined revenues of over 400 billion. And our mission is twofold. So on the first thread is all around making sure that we have the right policies in place to help hydrogen achieve its potential in the UK and to help industry to grow. And there we're working closely with government, both formally and informally, through consultations, direct dialogue, etc. And also through our 8 working groups, where we're looking to develop policy positions that we can then take forward for discussion. And the second element of our mission is around promoting our members and the sector. Again, we do this through a variety of routes, one of which is our industry showcase, which is available on our website. So profiles of all our members, their expertise and projects. So if anybody's looking for partners, there are searchable tools, and you can go and use those to find partners within the UK to work with. I know we're going to be focusing particularly on hydrogen production and green hydrogen today, so just a little snapshot of some of the other areas that we're looking to work on in 2023. So we're looking at storage and transportation of hydrogen coming up the agenda within the UK. So we'll be taking that dialogue forward, looking at the types of business models that will work to get that in play, how we can make sure that in terms of distributing hydrogen, we can get to all the geographies that are either producing or using hydrogen, and we're not excluding any areas at all. We're also going to be diving further into the world of regulations, codes and standards, making sure that new entrants have visibility of all the requirements, and also that the regulations that we have in place are appropriate and are understood and applied appropriately as well. And then we're also going to be working on the demand side, looking at areas such as hydrogen for transport in particular, which is an area where we see opportunities to learn from. So it'll be interesting to have that discussion later on. And having watched the video, I should also mention that our conference is coming up on the 24th of May at the QE2 Centre in London. So if you want to know what's going on in the UK, the theme is Getting to 2030. So we've got lots to talk about, some of which we'll cover today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celia. And yeah, definitely sounds like a very interesting event. Let's go, Christelle, next. We're going to start with the ladies. It's very rare that we get a majority ladies panel, so I'm really, really delighted today.
So Christelle, next, please.
Thank you, Belen. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to take part to this very interesting webinar. To say a few words about myself. So I'm Christelle Werquin. I started my career about 20 years ago in Brussels, working for the European institutions and also various public and private organizations. And I am a general delegate of France Hydrogène since 2016. France Hydrogène, so the French National Association, which gathers today more than 470 members. It brings together all the stakeholders of the French hydrogen sector, structured along the entire value chain. So we have major industrial groups developing large-scale projects in various fields, such as industry, mobility, or energy. We also have a lot of SMEs and innovative startups, more than 250. We gather also laboratories and research centers of excellence, also competitive clusters and local and regional authorities. And we act to structuring a high-performance, competitive and innovative French hydrogen industry. We also act to share and promote the challenges of the sector, and as a privileged interlocutor of public authorities, we assist the regulatory framework to support the deployment of hydrogen technologies in France. We are also involved at European level, so we are a member of Hydrogen Europe, and I'm myself member of the board of Hydrogen Europe, and with the objective to help structuring national associations network. Okay, so I'll come back later maybe on the message that we have for Europe regarding deployment of hydrogen.
Thank you very much, Christelle, for this great introduction. Okay, so now we have covered UK, we've covered France. Next, I'd like to invite Roel to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here amongst neighbors. My name is Roel Van De Pas. I'm a board member at NWBA, which is the Dutch Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Aside of that, I'm also a VP at Netstack, which is a Dutch manufacturer of fuel cell stacks and systems. As some of you might know, the Netherlands is quite a hydrogen economy. We have less members actually than my other panelists. We have over 50 members. Paying members at least at the NWBA, representing the hydrogen economy throughout the value chain. Within the Netherlands, we are the second largest producer of hydrogen within Europe, at quite a distance from Germany, that is. And we have a hydrogen policy, a national hydrogen policy. We're one of the many European countries which has such a policy, in which we've contributed in many ways to define ambition and keep that realistic, but actionable at the same time, which is to deliver about 0.5 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2025, up to 3 to 4 gigawatt by 2030. And we're really pushing to double that ambition as part of our commitment to Repower EU. And I look forward to discuss with you today the other policy ambitions that we have in the Netherlands, and also the strengths that we have as an ecosystem, not just as a hydrogen producer. The Netherlands has much more to offer to the European hydrogen economy, with the largest energy port in the world in Rotterdam, with very significant gas infrastructure and gas economy, all which we can use to the benefit of delivering this hydrogen energy transition together. So happy to be here, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much, Roel. Definitely a lot to add in here. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Guillermo, from my very own Spain, in this case, to explain what is going on over here. Go right ahead, Guillermo.
Thank you very much, Belen, for the introduction and for the kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Guillermo Figueruelo. I'm Business Development Manager at Aragon Hydrogen Foundation. We are a private non-profit organization promoted by our regional government in the Aragonese region almost 20 years ago, and our entity is also supported by boards of entities conformed by more than 90 entities, and we touch all the we promote hydrogen and fuel cell projects among the whole value chain of the hydrogen technologies, from green renewable hydrogen production to the final use in several applications. We have also supported in terms of policy our regional government since scratch. And indeed, we have published already 4 hydrogen master plans for our region. You know that in Spain, the Green Hydrogen Roadmap has been published in October 2020. Okay, so we were 13 years in advance developing this hydrogen master plan for our region. We are also part, of course, and since its creation, of the Spanish National Association of Hydrogen. And more about me. As I've mentioned before, I'm business development manager, but I have also several roles at the European level, such as a Hydrogen Valley cross-technical committee leader in Hydrogen Europe research for the last 3 years, and I am also an active partner or Sherpa working in several roundtables in the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance for the last 2 years. And last but not least, and since we are co-hosts of Red Month Zaragoza, I would like to invite you to the last day of the event, in which you will be able to visit our facilities. They are really nice, but also, and more important, they are really interesting, because we have several hydrogen electrolyzers, both test benches and commercial electrolyzers, in which we develop our R&D projects. But we have also another kind of demonstrations, natural gas and hydrogen blends, injection loops, and so on and so forth, and a couple of fuel cell cars.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. Okay, so now we've heard, and I can't quite believe now that I hear you guys talking, I can see how much experience we have in this like virtual room, and I am really, really excited about the questions that we have prepared for today. Okay, so we're going to begin from something really simple. I'm going to ask each of you, if you like, we can go in with this, starting with Celia again. First, if you can give us a little bit of context in the hydrogen development in your country, the opportunities and challenges that are faced. And the next question is going to be, what do you think has worked well? So keep that in mind, you know, in terms of what you're responding now, and keeping, you know, later a little bit the recommendation, so to speak. So Celia, if you want to begin.
Absolutely, thank you. So I guess colleagues have mentioned their own national strategies. So if you start with that, we've seen past 2 years plus really growing momentum, as we've seen across Europe and more widely, in terms of scaling up hydrogen, particularly to meet our decarbonisation goals, and obviously more recently with the threads around energy resilience. Our strategy laid out a vision of hydrogen delivering up to 35% of our final energy demand by 2050. So huge journey for us to go on between now and then. And since then, we've seen a number of policies and developments put in place to help scale that up, particularly on the production side. As I'm sure you all know, the focus here is on low carbon hydrogen. So we're looking at both electrolytic and CCUS enabled hydrogen, as well as potentially nuclear, with the emphasis on the decarbonisation journey through a number of different routes. So we've, in terms of sort of opportunities and challenges, we've put some good foundations in place subsequent to the hydrogen strategy to start, as I said, scaling up hydrogen production to the point now where we've got a pipeline of around 100 projects. And these are, if they come to pass, they will put us on a good path with our objective of 10 gigawatts by 2030, of which 50% at least should be electrolytic. These 100 projects actually amount to around 20 gigawatts by 2035. So that's, you know, if it all happens, it'll put us in a really good place. That work has been facilitated through our Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which is to provide CapEx funding, and our hydrogen business model, which is to provide OpEx funding, as well as related funds. We have a particular fund for industrial decarbonisation called the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, which is complementing some of those other initiatives. And all of these are helping to pull forward on the supply side. Details are still emerging, so we just had heads of terms for business models published just before Christmas. So there's still a lot to play for in terms of making sure that we deliver that goal. And I think that's when we talk about challenges, that's part of what we need to think about, making sure that we keep our eye on our objectives and make sure that what we're putting in place is aligned to those. And also that we keep an eye on what's happening elsewhere, which I know we're going to talk about later, and make sure that we maintain and build momentum so that the UK can retain its leadership role in this space. We're really keen to make sure that not only are we delivering against our net zero and energy resilience goals, but also goals around growth of the UK economy and international competitiveness. And within that, I think there are challenges around making sure that we develop UK supply chains, so making sure that the frameworks that we put in place support and encourage UK business growth. In other challenge areas I mentioned earlier, hydrogen for transport. We do have some support mechanisms in place, but it's I would describe as patchy. We need to bring that all together into a more rigorous strategy and vision going forward that brings together the different modes, the hydrogen refuelling infrastructure, so that players in the space, both on the demand and supply side, can see how everything will fit together. And also we have plans for hydrogen for heat. We need to make sure that we stick with our deadlines at the very least, and ideally accelerate those as well, because blending will be an important early market for the demand that we're looking to scale up. So we need to just make sure that we're developing those elements in parallel. So I'll pause there. Look forward to hearing what everybody else has got to say.
Thank you very much, Celia. Christelle, do you want to go next? Big shoes to fill now.
Yeah, thank you. So to say a few words about the French context, I would remind that France set out an ambitious national strategy in 2020, which committed it to developing a decarbonized hydrogen sector. The strategy is backed by 9 billion euros of public funding to enable the expansion of such a sector on an industrial scale right across France. The objective is actually to build 6.5 gigawatt of installed electrolyzer capacity by 2030, and in so doing reduce CO2 emissions by 6 million tons each year by 2030. The strategy is based on 3 main axes. The first one is to accelerate the investments for a decarbonized and competitive French industry. The objective is to scale up a competitive French electrolysis industry. The second one is to develop professional mobilities. So we talk here about vans, buses, trucks, railways, ships, airplanes, that are all concerned by hydrogen technology. And the third axis, last but not least, to support R&D large-scale demonstrators and the development of key components for tomorrow's hydrogen usages. This led to the implementation of a priority research program for H2 applications and a program to increase competencies and training. The global objective is to generate in France between 50,000 and 150,000 direct and indirect jobs. On our side, France Hydrogène, to deal with these objectives, we worked on a study, and we published a study as a roadmap for an ambitious hydrogen strategy, which divided the national approach in 2 scenarios. The first one, called Ambition 2030 scenario, targeted an annual production of decarbonized of low carbon and renewable. I will come back to it later because it's very important for us. Targeted 680,000 tons hydrogen, so renewable or low carbon hydrogen. And the second scenario, called Ambition Plus 2030, envisages a significant increase of the first target to more than 1 million tons of low carbon or renewable hydrogen. It was aimed to meet regulatory requirements of the Fit for 55 package. And we see today with the REPowerEU plan that you mentioned in introduction, Belen, that we are actually largely increasing ambitions at the European level. To meet the objectives, we identified in our study 7 large, so to say, basins, like clusters, that should act as cornerstones for large-scale rollout of hydrogen projects, where the basins are the geographical valleys where the pooling of production serving similar sectors will deliver actually cost reductions. So those basins, those valleys, represent around 85% of total demand in France. So setting up an integrated supply chain at the scale of these basins makes it possible to reduce costs thanks to the pooling of production and uses while benefiting from economies of scale. But apart from these basins, many projects are also being set up, some of which are large scale for the deployment of vehicles in particular. So these other 15% of demand represent an important part of the rise of the sector and will ensure a complete network of the national territory. We completed this first study in December 2022 with another part where we compare our 2 potential scenarios, Ambition and Ambition Plus, with the on-the-ground reality of projects already begun or planned by the industrial sector and local and regional government authorities. So the study evaluates the rollout of the hydrogen sector using the following criteria between the time the study was carried out until 2013. The criteria were low carbon or renewable hydrogen installed production capacity, the various end uses of hydrogen for industry, energy, and transportation, and the current state of resources and limiting factors insofar as this will act as a brake on the extent to which production capacity can be harnessed. This study, the second part of our study, demonstrates the dynamism of the H2 sector in France. Project rollout is on course to meet the targets of the national H2 strategy as set out in our Ambition Plus scenario. That means more than 1 million ton of hydrogen consumption, by 2030.
Yeah.
In one word, what worked well? We have many industrial players well positioned across the entire value chain, and with promising segments in manufacture of strategic materials and components, or operation of hydrogen production equipment, and also specialized equipment for transport and distribution of hydrogen. But we also have a French scientific community organized and mobilized, and a strong decarbonization commitments at both national and regional level. But the key factor of success was probably that this national strategy has been thought out from upstream to downstream. So from R&D to final to end uses. And the government, the French state, also set up an organization for the implementation of this plan. This is called the National Hydrogen Council, for which we provide the secretariat. We theoretically are in a position to create a competitive, renewable and low carbon hydrogen sector. Anyway, we have a big warning concerning the deployment that can be hampered by the regulations currently being discussed at European level, in particular those concerning a RED II delegated act. But probably this will be part of the conversation later, so I won't be any longer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Christelle. Like a lot of information in there. We'll probably come back to it, a little bit later within the next questions. Roel, go right ahead so that we can move.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to reflect on that also from the Dutch perspective. So first of all, maybe the policy framework. Just like the UK and France, to my understanding now, we have a hydrogen policy as one of the early movers around 2020. And at that time, I think also that was what Celia was referring to. Hydrogen strategies were formulated from the perspective of climate ambitions, and maybe we did not really take into account so much the current policy scenario where REPower EU is also aiming at energy security. So I think just like the UK, we are struggling with the same the outdated policy. We have to update some of our policies to include also the topics of energy security, and something else that Celia also mentioned is the economic recovery agenda, the post-COVID economic recovery and the green jobs agenda. So something that we try to now absorb in our national hydrogen framework, and that we try to update, if you like, the policy framework from that perspective. Right now, still, the national hydrogen policy is very much driven from the climate agenda and pursues climate policy goals. That is the state today. The instruments that we use to deliver on this policy framework, there's obviously a lot, but two are quite dominant. We have a total of about 2 billion euros allocated for hydrogen, amongst which 1.3 billion is reserved for the IPCEI framework, the important projects of common European interest. There was one Dutch project awarded under the first wave. There were 7 awarded under the second wave of the IPCEI, and a total of 7 projects, about 800 million euros of funding was allocated for widespread deployment of electrolyzer capacity in the Netherlands. So I think that's something that we are living up to using the IPCEI instrument. And we have a national growth fund under which I believe about 600 million euros are reserved for demonstration projects at scale. And like France is also investing in the human capital agenda, trying to create the human capital to deliver actually on the challenges that we are looking at. Because we have a lot of influencers in the Netherlands, but hydrogen engineers, technicians are quite a rare species, if you like. So these are two perspectives, the policy framework, it being quite explicit, very good policy ambitions. There's a great roadmap. Recently, the roadmap has been published, which I think is a very clear perspective on which policy goals are to be delivered upon, where in time, and are being matched by what policy instruments. The targets, I think I've mentioned before, it's about 0.5 gigawatt of green electrolyzer capacity 2025, 3 to 4 gigawatts by 2030. And we are looking at ways to double this ambition, but that's still in discussion at Parliament. And we are also targeting a cost reduction of the production cost of green hydrogen per metric ton by about 65% in 2030, as opposed to the base year 2018. So I hope this provides a very brief and summarized discussion of the policy framework, the targets that it's pursuing, the instruments that we are using, the concrete targets that we are delivering, and at least the 7 key projects under the IPCEI for electrolyzer deployment that have already been awarded, that have already been not just approved by the European Commission, but have already been processed also by the national government in terms of funding allocation. So I think in that respect, the Dutch government is doing quite some excellent work in delivering on the hydrogen economy. But that's it for me.
Well, Roel, you're going to have a lot of work to double all those ambitions as well. because this is not nothing, you know, multiplying by 2. Also, you mentioned by 2025, and so I'm guessing multiplying by 2030, hopefully, not
So
2025.
2025 is 0.5 gigawatts, so 500 megawatt of installed electrolyzer,
right, okay.
green electrolyzer capacity, and 3 to 4 gigawatt by 2030. It is this target of 3 to 4 gigawatt that we are considering to double, but here we have to play with how to say, with technology availability, with human capital availability. There is a lot of boundary conditions and crucial enabling factors that we have to consider from a very balanced perspective.
Thank you very much for
also something that Christelle referred to is that we really try to pursue this part of the energy transition from a holistic perspective, where we support supply and demand simultaneously, and where France is also targeting the local the growth and the incubation of a local electrolyzer manufacturing ecosystem. This also applies in the Netherlands, and I think for all of us, we don't want to copy paste the mistakes that we've made with the solar panels, with the wind turbines, with the batteries, where we export all of the manufacturing industry to low labor countries, and we lose actually a lot of the green jobs and a lot of the economic potential, and we end up with less environmental friendly and an inefficient energy transition. So that's also something that which limits maybe the ambition, but creates a better energy transition. That's one of the dilemmas that we are balancing at the moment.
You know, if only we were to get that right, that would be a massive win, considering what we've learned from solar. So thank you very much for making that point, because I think it was probably there, but like pointing it out, you know, it's really important. I think definitely the industry and the way that we understand it has changed completely. Whether that will stand the test of time when equipment from other countries may come a lot cheaper is something that we need to be seen. Guillermo, go right ahead. We're still missing that key part in Spain, and then we'll move on to like the quick fire questions that are going to be.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to fully subscribe the last statement from Roel, and I think that each country, well, each European country is trying to build like their national electrolyzer gigafactory, but finally we are fighting or competing against each other. I mean, I think that we should or we must go on a joint work, and this is also what the IPCI's common projects are looking for. But I will mention some targets in a similar way as Roel has done. But I would like to start with the context in Spain. Coming back 20 years ago, because the National Hydrogen Association in Spain got born, and a year later, so 19 years ago, it's my entity, Aragón Hydrogen Foundation, the one that was promoted by the regional government, and a year later, so 17 years ago, it was the National Hydrogen Center for Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Research, the one that was created in the middle south of Spain. So it means that we have done and we have developed much research since that, not only alone this couple of entities, but also together with plenty ecosystem of R&D centers. We are indeed the most representative country in Hydrogen Europe research. I think that we have like 19 members, which are a lot, and more are coming each month. Nevertheless, we are still far away from the best countries or countries that have more patents in terms of hydrogen, but this is issue that we have usually in Spain, that we are still lagging behind in these terms of patenting. For example, from Scandinavian countries, Japan or the USA. And coming back or coming a little bit closer to what we are experiencing right now, I think that we could say that the private sector has not started facing hydrogen technologies until 4 or 5 years ago. The gas TSOs and DSOs started that process. Then the electric ones came, and nowadays, during the last year or 2 years, maybe since the Spanish Green Hydrogen Roadmap was released 2 years ago, there are the big ones or the SMEs around renewable projects, above of all solar and wind, the ones that are turning their sites also to hydrogen projects and to hydrogen demonstration issues. So the targets for the Spanish green hydrogen roadmap are quite similar to the ones that Roel has mentioned for 2030, where we are expecting 4 gigawatts, which will represent around 25% of our intern hydrogen consumption in industry right now. We are expecting to allocate between 100 and 150 hydrogen refueling stations with several thousand vehicles, not only coaches or buses, but also light vehicles, forklifts, and a couple of trains. We are also thinking about trains really hard here in Spain. And with regard to the money, almost 9 billion euros are expected to be put on the table until the moment. We have this denominated PERTE in Spain, calls in Spain, that have already allocated around 400 million euros for the last year, and we are expecting 900 millions more to come until 2026. And here we have already some lessons learned, and you mentioned before, Belén, what we have done well, but also what we can improve. So we have seen a really extremely unbalanced people working on this kind of proposal. So there were call more dedicated to the deployment of big projects, which is called the Pioneros, Hydrogen Pioneros, in which more than 160 proposals were submitted, and only and less than 30 of them were finally granted. This is a really not good match for this call, but on the other way around, there were like 80 million allocated for R&D projects, and only half of the budget has been finally granted because there were not enough proposals submitted, or the quality of the proposals was not the appropriate. So this is something that we have done really well, created this expectation in Spain for the deployment of this kind of projects, but at the same time we need still to deploy this R&D, and this is a must, not only for Spain but for every country. And finally, a clear number from the IPCI's projects, because it was released yesterday, and then I think it's a really good news for Spain, but also for the other European countries. 1 out of 5 IPCI projects are taking place in Spain, and it has been already released that 450 million euros are going to be allocated this year as a policy instrument for the deployment of this kind of projects in the couple of waves that have already been evaluated. It means that the last year, 2022, has been a really busy year, but it's going to be even more exciting 2023 in our country.
I think the next 10 years in general are going to be really exciting in this industry. I think most of you have asked what has worked well in your country already. Maybe except you, Celia, I don't know if you want to say something specific. So otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next question.
I'll just chip in quickly. Thank you. So very much echo what Christelle was saying in terms of the depth and breadth of players and companies and expertise that we can bring to this challenge of scale up that we have, and growing. You know, we get applications for new members every week. So and similarly, how the science community has mobilized. We've got a number of world leading companies, Ceres Power, ITM as a couple of examples, spun out of UK universities. I think we've done that well. I think the government has, as well as setting out its vision, is planned a very clear pathway in terms of next steps, and its roadmap defines we'll do this and this and this on set dates, and to a pretty good degree have kept to that. It's how we respond to wider developments and making sure that the specifics of project approvals and project start dates and all of those sorts of things being met as well. We need to keep up with that as well. And I think another thing that has worked well, when we look at our industrial clusters, we've got some really nice examples of energy intensive users coming together with players in the hydrogen space to look at how we can build those clusters up and help with their decarbonisation journeys.
And this is a question for whomever wants to take it. Not all of you have to answer it if you don't want to, but like, what do you see or what have you heard now from other countries that you think you could learn from that experience? Yeah, go on, Celia. Thank you.
I touched on it earlier, and it's the subject of hydrogen for transport. As I say, we've got pockets of activity here. We've had 100 million go into zero carbon bus trials and 100+ million go into freight trials, includes EVs, I should say. But we don't have a clear vision of how the transport piece fits together. We don't have targets. We can have a separate conversation about targets, but we don't have any anyway. We don't have a plan to roll out refueling infrastructure. So, as I say, we've got pockets and a patchwork of some good areas of activity, and we've got some work going on in trains as well and aviation, but nothing that sits above that says, we're going to do this by this. As I said, on the hydrogen production side, we've got these clear milestones, but nothing to match that on the hydrogen for transport side. And when I hear from our colleagues of we were going to have XY hydrogen refueling stations by such and such a date and this many vehicles, we need some framework like that to help the many companies that are active in this space, to give them confidence and to allow them to scale up and to link across to match demand and supply in that area.
Good point. Having the framework does help. In the end, it's kind of complicated work, isn't it? Because you're trying to get a market to create services that you need, but without really pushing them, because then you're determining what's happening. And in some cases I've come across, certainly the case of Spain, the policy is there, but then the detail of how it's going to happen is the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is what is to be worked out. Who wants to add here? Christelle, go right ahead. Yeah, and then I'll come to you, Roel.
Okay, so in a few words, yes, actually, we are trying to build up a plan to develop mobility and industry end uses, and this is very the big challenge, as you said, is to scale up in order to reduce the costs. But also, I wanted to come back to what you said, Celia, in your introduction, when you mentioned the way you promote technological neutrality in the UK in the development of hydrogen production sector. We are also totally in favor of technological neutrality. We see renewable electricity sources as the main pillar to produce renewable hydrogen, but also we have to consider other means to produce renewable or low carbon H2. So such as you said, SMR and CCS, but also we actually do consider in France that all the production pathways that are compliant with a threshold of 3.38 kilos CO2 equivalent per kilo H2 will be needed to be in 2030 on tracks for delivering net zero greenhouse gases emission in the EU by 2050. And this is essential that we don't exclude low carbon H2 in the RED 3 targets. In general, that we do not exclude low carbon from the European framework, legal framework.
This is a big change, to change as compared to what it is right now. But we'll see whether, we'll go in this direction. Roel, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your question is what samples or what what success factors of other countries we could better copy. And I think that in terms of the very clear formulation of the ambition in France to really develop a local ecosystem also of the manufacturing society and to create green jobs in the process, I think that is a very valuable statement to make, and not one that we have already made in such a clear expression. So we do have very tangible goals when it comes to the installed capacity of electrolyzers and green hydrogen production capacity. We have very tangible goals when it comes to cost reduction of green hydrogen production to create some kind of break-even point for enabling transitions. But we don't have a very clear goal set or a very clear formulation when it comes to the amount of green jobs or the industries that we want to develop locally. And I know that's always difficult under the frameworks of industrial politics and the limitations we have in Europe, but I see other countries being much more pronounced and much more clearly formulated there. That might be something that we want to consider as well, and something to take back for our own consideration.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree, actually. And we do need to think about this industry like grassroots up. I think we do need to bear in mind that this is the way the renewable energy were originally thought of. And then they changed into something else. Because, you know, this is some lessons I think that we can learn in that. This is something also important. I mean, the solar industry was born pretty much in Germany. It had everything was happening in there. And then it all became something else. So I think we need to learn from that experience too, I think. Fernando, you want to add something here? Yeah, go right ahead.
Do you mean Guillermo?
Guillermo, that's what I meant. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I just changed your name.
Yeah. I don't know how Celia will take it, but when I think about UK, I think about mobility as a good example, but she just turned around it, I think. And I fully agree with the last statement from Roel also. If I think about France's manufacturing capacity, but I think that the synergies that they already have from other sectors make the difference, like the big players that Christelle has mentioned before. And if I think about Netherlands or the Dutch economies, obviously ports and decarbonizing and reindustrializing the oil and gas economy that they have, and a couple of more examples, but Germany is obviously investment, and Scandinavia is R&D excellence. It's a good overview of Europe.
Europe, it seems like when you consider the whole of Europe, sort of like we're doing a lot of things right. So the next question is about how do you think European collaboration in terms of hydrogen is working? I don't know, you can talk about regulation, you can talk about technology, you can talk about industrial development, you know, how do you think, what's your opinion? Is it working? Could it work better potentially? Leave it up to whomever wants to take it, you know, because we don't have a lot of time, just keep it short, you know, but other than that, like, what do you think has worked basically, and what do you think can be improved? Go on, Christelle.
Okay, very quickly, because you all mentioned the important project of common European interest, and indeed we have to say it's complicated to to make it happen, but anyway, we were very much involved also in the IPCEI projects with 10 projects in the first wave, 10 French projects in the first waves, and we are also involved in the next waves. But yes, I just wanted to point out the need for a clear, stable and sustainable regulatory framework, because the hydrogen strategy is very ambitious. And as you mentioned, Belen, the war in Ukraine, which gave rise to REPowerEU plan, is a real game changer. So we welcome the European Commission desire to accelerate H2 strategy in order to move away from dependency on Russian gas as quickly as possible. So it does so by raising the renewable H2 production target by 100% between now and 2030. So we as you know, we identify now, well, the European Commission identifies now 10, not only 10, but 20 megatons of hydrogen consumed in the EU. half of which will be produced within the EU and the other half imported from outside the EU. But I just want to give you one word about this. If you want to achieve the EC's goal of producing 10 million tons of renewable H2 in the EU, it would require the production of an additional 550 terawatt hours of electricity from renewable sources. This is a considerable amount. That's why we insist on the idea that we should not exclude from the regulatory framework the low carbon hydrogen.
Would we have the time though to build the nuclear plants in time to have enough hydrogen? Because nuclear plants take many years to be built. Is it? I don't know. Just at least you're looking at 10 years, right? The commissioning period. So I'm just saying, in terms of the 2030 target, maybe it doesn't help us as much. I don't know. Just leaving it out there. And next person wants to take a role. For example, I'm volunteering you.
No, I think we're already quite on board and we're quite like-minded. In the Netherlands, we have some other issues as well with RED III. So when we talk about the actionability of the renewable energy directives, of course, a very clear formulation of what is included, what do we consider green. There is no such thing as a standardized and a very well-pronounced agreement on what qualifies and what disqualifies. So from a European regulatory perspective, I think that is one of the main challenges that we have to define. And at the same time, in Holland, we're also struggling with the issue that achieving specific percentages of your hydrogen production to be green is very complicated when you have a huge installed base already of hydrogen production, which to our understanding should not be part of this equation. But right now, in the framework of the RED, is indeed part of RED III. So therefore, we have some other policy challenges to tackle, which go way beyond the availability of renewables. And yeah, I fully subscribe to the French perspective. You need to plan hydrogen not as an isolated policy framework, but you need to understand that for renewable hydrogen production, you need the feedstock, which is green electricity, and preferably green electricity, which would not otherwise be used for other clean power purposes. Because if we would plan it in such a way, then probably we end up with hydrogen, which is more polluting than using the electricity in a sensible manner. So this inclusive policy puzzle is so extremely difficult. And it is also, how to say, to address this puzzle, not just at the European level, but also at the national and even at the regional level, requires a very deep understanding of power economics, of mass and energy balances, of questions that are new to a lot of the regulators, bureaucrats, and this makes it very complicated. So I think at the European level, we need a better framework, and we need good definitions and inclusive definitions to meet the targets and to deliver a hydrogen economy which also makes sense.
Thank you very much. Actually, someone here in the question says, what has been done on the human capital side? And someone says that you made a good point about the deficit in human capital. You know, where is the biggest skill gap in the value chain right now? Or which skills are there more demand for? You want to comment on this side?
I would love to. I think there is a curse with the hydrogen economy that it's both gas and electricity. So most of our gas people don't have sufficient electricity knowledge, and most of our electricians don't have sufficient gas knowledge. So these electrochemical devices, they are cursed with requiring a multi-skill set, which is not part of the academia. And I think that's something that we share all together. And that's not something that only works at the technician level, but also on the engineering level. This is a huge complication. At least in the Netherlands, it's one of our biggest concerns.
I think the only good thing about this is that we're all in the same boat. I don't see anywhere in the world where, you know, human capital is not an issue in this item. So we're just really here is how quickly can we get people into the industry to respond to what we need. Whether we have a good vision over what that is, I suppose, like the question that we need to ask. May I continue here a couple of minutes with the questions that we do have? Sonia here makes she says, that Germany in 2018 had 5.4 terawatt of renewable power that was lost, and that would now not be lost, if we had hydrogen. It's a good point. So 500 terawatts, as Christelle mentioned, it's a huge amount of renewable capacity to build. I mean, if we can use anything that is there, I don't mind if it's nuclear, whatever it is, if that we're currently curtailing, that is the first thing that we need to make sure that we use. I fully agree with that. We have here a question for the UK. How much impact is in the news? Okay, how much impact is in the news in UK about taxing renewable energy? Article implied. Okay, the article implied some of the renewable members are reevaluating their business plans.
Yeah, happy to respond to that. I mean, we hear on a regular basis, don't we, about the hidden taxes on the fossil industry, and as has been noted in the press, taxes that go directly to renewables. It absolutely feels counter to our objectives here. So be good to sort of look at the balance there. Obviously, like everywhere else, we've got a cost of living crisis. I'm not sure this is quite the right solution that we need to take forward in order to deliver that. I'm sure there are better alternatives. So yeah, I fully empathise with the question.
Let me continue if you like, because let's try to do these three, and we haven't got to talk about the whole US debacle, but maybe for another webinar, where we can focus on what that means for us, which is also a big deal. But for now, question from Ricardo: in what time frame do you think hydrogen will be commercially viable in replacement for conventional fuels? Can I just get the year that you guys have in your own hydrogen route, more or less where that's going to happen, and then let's compare them? So Roel, you first.
Yeah, so I already mentioned the cost engineering targets with 2030. They are aimed at meeting break-even point for the mass volume applications such as steel making, fertilizer production, and chemical feedstock. But of course, there is not one hydrogen market. There are many hydrogen markets. Hydrogen as a fuel has different values than hydrogen. So this target could be met earlier than hydrogen for power generation. But in general, we are aiming at creating substance volume break-even points in 2030.
What about you guys in your own countries? Is there any difference, or is the 2030 sort of target also ring true?
I would say,
think sorry, after you.
Yeah, thank you, Celia. I would say that it will come, as Roel has mentioned, there are several hydrogen markets, but it will come through the years until 2030. For instance, you can already find these strong business cases for forklifts, or if you can work together with a joint venture with electric utility, and you have a low electricity price, you can have already a strong or moderately strong business case for renewable hydrogen production if you have, therefore, a close off-taker. So business cases are already appearing in the market right now without subsidies, I mean.
Celia?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I'd hesitate to put a number. I think there's so many variables, as Roel and Guillermo mentioned, different markets where how the figures line up is going to vary, and also it will of course depend on how we are able to scale up and bring costs down, whether it's economies of scale or other mechanisms that are bringing the cost of production down as part of the whole hydrogen landscape. So a lot of variables in there. We already have some fully commercial markets, and we'll start to see the others coming through in the next few years, I think.
Okay, guys, and sorry about the sorry, Christelle, do you have an answer to this actually for yours 2030 as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. I fully agree with Roel, actually. I won't take much time.
The last one is actually something that we were discussing, you and I, in the preparation, is: do you see room for the small developers in the green hydrogen industry? Do you see room for these small companies to become, larger? Or, Alejandro here says most projects and government aid initiatives seem to all be absorbed by the large players. So is this industry like a democratizer, where small local or are we going to see, what is your opinion? This is an opinion-based thing, you know, like larger players. Remember, Christelle, we were talking about this? So what's the thinking? Celia's smiling, so do you have an opinion, a strong opinion over how this is going to pan out?
I understand the sentiment that, you know, there's a lot in this for the bigger companies, but I absolutely see a place for companies across the piece. We talked earlier about the need for skills and to develop supply chain and all this sort of thing, and these companies will evolve and grow and find new markets. You know, we've got members who came to us new to the hydrogen space. They've seen a huge uptick in terms of that particular market, and I think we'll see that in other organizations and companies as well. So you know, it's a complicated picture. There are many challenges, but there's you know, good opportunities as well. And we talked about growing our industries, growing our competitive positions, and that's all part of what this is about, I think.
Yeah, I read the question. I think it was from Alejandro, I think.
Yeah, it was.
And he was mentioning the Spanish case, for instance. It's a tricky question to answer in public, but I think that is quite a good approach that the big players take the lead right now, because the investments that you need to do and to create this mass scale market are huge, and no one can do but these big entities. But the issue is how the government or the people that draft these calls publish them to the SMEs, for instance, because they have been telling us many times that these funds are going to reach the SMEs. And finally, what we are watching right now, just 3 or 4 weeks after the publication of the evaluation of the call, is that the money is going to the big players. But for sure, there are SMEs behind in the consortiums that will receive also this money and will be involved in the mass market creation through the development of their own products and own services. And this is, I think, more an issue of communication from the government right now, because obviously the big players cannot do everything alone, and they will need several more small players that are more specialized in each topic and in each issue that you need to solve in your installation.
Thank you very much. Roel or Christelle, do you want to add anything? Just to, in terms of this last question, and Roel, please do share the Dutch national hydrogen roadmap. I think it's really valuable for people who want to take a look at it. You can all do the same, by the way, whatever you want to share in there. Feel free. Go on, Roel.
Yeah, I've just sent it to you directly. No idea how to share it with the rest of the population. And I think that during the course of this discussion, we see that amongst all the panelists and amongst all the European nations, we struggle with the same policy goals. And we are, you know, we are united in the challenges that we have, both from a climate and energy security and a human capital perspective. I think we're already working together in a very fantastic way under Hydrogen Europe as a larger framework, and we're already working together at the company-to-company level within the framework of the IPCEI. So I think there's few things that unite us so much within Europe as our hydrogen challenge, and I hope that's something that we can push forward in making this energy transition work.
Thank you very, very much. That's a nice way to conclude it. Just Christelle, you're the only one that hasn't still pronounced. Yeah.
As a last word, I would say that we are convinced that it is essential to cooperate between EU national associations, but of course between countries, because the game is at international scale, actually. And when you see, we don't have time, I guess, to talk about IRA, but when you see the moves, what happens, the dynamics in other regions of the world, especially in the USA, we see that we don't have time to lose. We are actually losing ground right now. So we have to accelerate and we have to cooperate.
Thank you very much, Christelle. We would have wanted to cover that a little bit more, but unfortunately time is short. Maybe in another, because this is a really interesting conversation, going forward. I see immense amounts of strengths. I see immense amounts of strengths at the country levels, that you mentioned, but also the European level. We've been working on this for a long time. And I think what's very important that we usually maybe don't pay that much attention to is that the networking, the knowing people, the trust communities are there. We know each other, we've worked with each other for some time. But Christelle made a really good point there. Like, no one else is idling, waiting to see, how things are going to, turn out for us. So if anything, like we're literally in a test bed, and we need to make sure, that these things do work. So, I'm sure there is ways to make it better. I'm sure also, at the European level, people are looking at what the US is doing and seeing what bits of that could be, implemented over here and could work as well. So at the very least, we know it's not going to get boring for the next 10 years or so. We're going to be working more than ever before in this industry. We're going to be bringing a lot of people to work on this side and the decarbonization side. So I think this is just literally the beginning from what I've heard from you guys. I look forward, to checking in maybe next year and see how things are going in the year after, and let's keep in touch. Because at the end of the day, we are a big continent. If we get it right, I think it's going to be good for all of us, especially since hopefully we learn the lessons from what happened at the solar PV, like maybe 20 years ago. So thank you very much, Celia. Thank you very much, Christelle. Thank you very much, Roel, and thank you very much, Guillermo, for participating in this webinar. It's been a pleasure, and I really look forward to keep talking to you guys and learning more about what you each are doing, in your own country. So thank you very much, and speak